Greetings! In this video I'm going to provide a tutorial on Moderato found on page 78 of the Christopher Parkening Classical Guitar Method Volume 1. This is a great piece to practice our rest stroke. So let's go ahead and jump in and I'll show you what I'm talking about. If you remember from my earlier videos, rest stroke is where I pull through the string onto the next string. So in this case I'm using my ring finger to play string 1 and I pull through and rest that finger on string 2. A free stroke would be where I simply curl my finger and don't touch any other strings. A rest stroke can produce a much larger and thicker sound and tone because it gets the string to vibrate at a different angle, which is more parallel to the surface of the top of the guitar, and it can produce a nicer tone. And it's also louder because we get more weight behind our hand. It's a stronger movement. Weaker movements get a weaker sound, and stronger movements get a stronger sound. And moving your whole forearm can get a much bigger sound than just curling your finger. So in the first measure, it would look something like this. I have free stroke, rest stroke on the melody, free stroke, rest stroke, free stroke. So there's just two rest strokes in that first measure, just our melody notes that have the up stems, the G and the E. As you can see, they kind of pop out. And there's two reasons for that. One reason is that they're louder, and the second reason is they actually have a better tone. In music, tone refers to a quality of the sound wave. When a sound has nice tone, it has a fuller, thicker sound, and sounds with nice tone fit together better. Whereas if you have a sound that has poor tone and a sound that has a nice round, rich tone, you're going to hear the fuller tone, but the other sound is going to be lost in the mix. I once heard a vocalist practicing with a piano player, and the vocalist tone was a little bit off, and I had difficulty hearing her over the piano. And then the vocalist instructor encouraged her to make some adjustments in how she was singing. And then she sang with better tone. And the second time that she sang, I could hear her voice more clearly and the piano clearly because they both had good tone. So that's a principle of music. Good tone fits with good tone. But if you have a good tone and a bad tone, the good tone is going to drown out the bad tone. So in this case, we're deliberately getting a bigger tone, a thicker tone on the melody notes, and it helps them to just stand out. It directs the ear to know this is what's important and this is what I should be listening to. You can see that that melody really pulls the ear along and it stands out rather than just sounding mixed in a wash of even sound. So be intentional, play those melody notes extra loud and with rest strokes, and they will go a lot further. I would also encourage you to let that third beat ring out into the next measure. So this E at the end of measure 1 is going to hang out until we get to our C on the second beat of measure 2. So again, G, E, let it ring, and then on to C. If we do that, it sounds like a more continuous melody, even though the chord is changing. It's something called a suspension in music when the chord changes. So for example, when I play the second measure into the third measure, I'm going to have this E ringing out over a G7 chord. And then when I get to that D, it settles E, D onto a chord tone. That's called a suspension. And I'm going to go ahead and play measure 2 and measure 3 so you can hear what that sounds like. If we're intentional to train our hand to move when it needs to, then we can let those notes ring out longer. So I don't move earlier than I need to, I move at the last moment. In this case, there are situations when we do want to move in anticipation. But in this case, it's very good to hang on to those non-chord tones and let them ring out over the next chord. The other advice I would give you is to go ahead and roll those chords at the end of each section. So we have two main sections. The first two systems make up the A section, and the second two systems make up the B section. And they both end with a C chord. But it sounds a little nicer if we roll that chord. I would encourage you to try to hit the beat with the top note. Sometimes people start on the beat with the lowest note and roll up to the top and completely miss the beat. So for example, if I do this, I'm going to play it and hit the beat first. Bum, bum, bum. I want that melody to land on the beat. If I were to do something like this, all of a sudden that just gets somewhat uncoordinated. It sounds a little clunky. And what you can do is just start to roll the chord a little bit early and land on the beat. I would practice that with a metronome. It sounds much nicer that way. It flows. So I encourage you to practice that. As far as rolling chords, a great way to learn how to do that if your hand hasn't learned that yet is to start by playing just one note at a time. So I'm going to start with the bottom note and move my way up to the highest note. If that's hard for you to do evenly in time, then I would encourage you to take it even slower. But find a speed in which it's nice and even. And once your hand gets used to that, you can take it a little faster. And sometimes you might need to sleep on it because your brain builds new pathways while you're sleeping. But just get to the point where it's pretty easy to flow and really control each attack individually. And then, one starts to get a little faster. What I would encourage you to do is try to turn your hand. It's as though you're turning a doorknob to the right. So a little bit of a sweep as I pick. And once you get used to that, that's going to allow you to take it even faster. You could even just curl your fingers really quickly. Either way is fine. You get a slightly different sound. I think it sounds a little more organic when you turn your hand, but it's very subtle. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I would encourage you to be able to do both. There are situations where you need the stability to keep your hand right in the same position and not turn that hand away, but there are situations in which you're coming to the end of a phrase and it's perfectly fine to do a nice physical movement that's going to accentuate the gesture. Another way to think about rolling chords is to think about going from infinitely slow to infinitely fast. Infinitely fast is all four notes at once. And then if we slow down a little bit, and obviously infinitely slow would be you play one note and you never get to the second one. But think about that, just crescendo and speed. I guess I should say accelerando is what it really is. Those are some great exercises to develop your ability to roll chords, because a different speed roll is going to sound appropriate in different situations, and you just want your hands to be ready to respond and do what sounds nice. So I encourage you to work on those three elements. We've got rest strokes for our melody, and then we have letting them ring out over into the next measure. I'm exaggerating that third beat a little bit just to emphasize that point, and then rolling that chord onto the beat, landing on the beat. If you do that, it's going to dress it up a lot. One more thing you could do is add a little bit of a vibrato. I wouldn't do too much because we can't vibrato all the notes because we have a lot of open string notes. But if you have it a little subtle and just rock that arm, then it's going to add a lot to it. So I encourage you to practice these and learn these skills, and we can start to apply them to all sorts of pieces of music. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this was helpful.